Well, there's been another twist in the dispute between HungryPanda and some of its riders, with the food delivery company accusing some workers of intimidation and blackmail and admitting it contacted Chinese police to complain about their conduct in Australia. Last week, the ABC revealed that in early February, some HungryPanda riders in Sydney were called by police in China who warned them not to take part in industrial activity as part of their campaign for better wages and conditions. Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedgetts joins me now with the latest. Hi there, Stephen. So you just explain the history of this dispute first?
Yeah, it's a complicated backstory, but just quickly, Mel, essentially what we've got here is an industrial dispute between HungryPanda and some of its riders. These are essentially contractors that work for the company, driving hot meals around the city, particularly in the larger cities. It's particularly popular with the Chinese diaspora in the larger cities. Now, many of those riders say that they aren't being paid sufficiently and they've been caught up in a dispute with the company. At the beginning of February, some of those riders who were together on a WeChat group started to talk about taking industrial action, basically refusing to work during the Lunar New Year period as a way of putting pressure on the company. Now, as that was happening, some of those riders, as the ABC revealed last week, actually got calls from the Chinese police asking what they were doing. In some instances, what seemed like a pretty clear attempt to intimidate them, to stop them taking action. That drew a response from the federal government, who said it was concerned not only by the allegations of potential foreign interference, but also more broadly that they retained concerns about the practices that HungryPanda has been using. Now, at the time, we got a brief response from HungryPanda saying really essentially one thing, namely that if these calls had happened, that they had nothing to do with HungryPanda, that they weren't behind the calls from the Chinese police, and if those calls did happen, they must have happened independently. But in the week or so since then, we've had a slightly longer exchange with the company to try and get more of a sense of their side of the story, which is what's led to these latest revelations.
Okay, so yeah, take us through what the latest developments are.
So HungryPanda has conceded that after this dispute first kicked off, they did get in touch with police in China. Now, to be clear, this is separate to the calls that were made in the beginning of the month. This is in response to what HungryPanda says was a campaign of intimidation and blackmail from some of its riders about sort of 10 or 15 days after this story first started to brew. Now, the reason they said they did this is because there was a campaign by some riders to intimidate other riders to join their stop work. In other words, they said that riders that wanted to continue to work during the Chinese New Year period were being intimidated by those who were saying, no, we've got to take industrial action. Now, the ABC has confirmed and verified that there were at least some threatening messages that were in fact sent on this WeChat group. We've been shown some screenshots that show, for example, some riders talking amongst themselves about trying to work out who was still working. In another message, you see one person saying that they are going to go around and potentially puncture the tyres, or that people should go and puncture the tyres of those who are still working. And HungryPanda told the ABC that after these alleged threats escalated, it took the step of going to the police. So they went to the police in New South Wales at a Sydney Central station. After they said they got no decent response, or after the police refused to properly investigate, that's their allegation, they said that they then resorted to contacting cyber police in China to try and put a halt to the activity. Now, HungryPanda says that the Chinese police basically told them they couldn't do anything about it and that they weren't going to investigate. They say, as far as they know, nothing happened. But it does shine a light on this complicated interaction that we're seeing at the moment around this very complex industrial dispute.
And has the government had anything to say about this?
No, nothing at this stage. As I mentioned, the government said when the reports of the Chinese police getting involved first surfaced that they were concerned by that. More broadly, the government, as I mentioned, is worried by some of the industrial practices by HungryPanda. They haven't yet weighed in on this latest twist. We'll have to wait and see whether anyone wants to wade in on that. As I say, though, it's a complicated situation. The government certainly wouldn't want to see companies making appeals to Chinese police, even if it is over something like WeChat, which is a Chinese-owned platform, heavily regulated by the Chinese government. I think the government's view would likely be if there's a dispute in Australia, it's got to be sorted out by Australian authorities, not by Chinese authorities. And they certainly don't want to see Chinese police making any sort of phone calls to people in Australia, including Chinese nationals. So that's an important principle. And although this dispute is very murky and there are allegations of wrongdoing on both sides, I think you'll find that's a pretty important principle that the government, at least, will want to see maintained.